This is a transmission out of a 48-inch Cub Cadet mower, and the mower was wanting to steer to the left going up a hill. This thing wasn't even pulling at all, so the pump's out in it, and I'm going to show you how to put a new one in it. To take it out, it's real easy. I already got it out. As you can see, there's only 6 bolts that hold it up in there. There's 2 back here and 1 up here on the front, and then the same thing over on the other side. So you got 6 bolts. This is where your tube goes up through, your fill tube or your breather goes up through the top. There's no way to drain these and change the fluid in, or the oil in them, unless you pop the oil pan off of the bottom of them, which is kind of difficult to do. This one's still up under there, and you can see even jacked up, there's not really much room yet to get a big pan like this one. This is a big kitty litter pan to bust it loose, drain all the oil that way. You can get a new filter for them. Put your new filter in, fill them back up with 2050 oil. This one, I've got all the oil drained out of it. I'm getting ready to take it inside, and I'm going to put it on the bench and show you how to take it apart. Okay, but before I do that, I'm going to show you something here. That these pans are just siliconed on. There's no gasket in there. There's nowhere to get behind this thing. The best thing that I've found to use is like a putty knife, something really skinny, and you want to get in between the pan and the housing, and just try to tap that thing in there. And a screwdriver is too fat. You can't get it in here. But if you can get a putty knife in there and just kind of get it started, and then you can work your way around it, it'll pop off of there. But don't try to pry this thing off, because you'll end up breaking something. Once you get about halfway around it, you should be able to get it off there pretty easy. But you get the point. This has to come off in order to take the inside parts apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing off here. There's gonna be a little bit of oil come out. I don't want to get it all over my bench. I'm gonna go up here and see if I can get in there with a screwdriver and pry it a little bit. There we go. And there you go. Okay, now let's get it in there on the bench. Okay, now that we got all the covers off of it, go ahead and pop that oil filter off and get you a brand new one to put back on there. Don't use that one. And you can see the insides of it, what it looks like. We'll go ahead and start taking it apart. If you go to the back corner of it, you'll find this little plastic cover. Go ahead and pop that off too while you got that screwdriver in your hand. And before we can get the pump out of it, you have to take all these gears and shafts out of the back of it. And on this side, there's a little gear It's actually for the brake with a little clip on the shaft in front of it. Take that clip off of it and pull the gear just straight off of it. And take note of the position of this thing when I show you in the still picture, because I'm going to show you later on how to put this thing back on there wrong. Another clip that kind of holds that seal in place. Weird looking thing. Pop that off with a screwdriver. Try not to damage it because those are hard to find. Then you can take the screwdriver, jab it into that seal, and just pop it out of there. There's another clip that holds the bearing on. You'll have to get you a clip tool and get you a screwdriver behind it and kind of work with it to get that clip off. But once you do, the shaft and that it holds on to the thing is going to come right out of there. Get in the back, pull that shaft out, and then inside the case you can see another gear that actually goes to the shaft that drives the pump itself. Now once we pull that out, we can go on top again and start pulling the pump out of it. Okay, the shaft's out of it. We got 3 bolts right here. They're 9/16. Take those out. And then everything's going to lift out of there and fly all to pieces. And if you got a phone, make sure you take pictures. Make sure you've got a diagram of exactly how everything goes back in here. There's not much here, not for me anyway, but it's easier coming out than it's going to be putting this thing back in. Here's our rear pump. We'll sit it in here because I got all kinds of oil all over the place. And this is the main part of the pump. There's a little piece of metal that goes right here. It just sits in there. That's going to fall out. Don't lose it. And that's your relief for your neutral. The thing that you just heard fall down in there, it's just a guide that it goes right here, and there's another one down here that aligns the pump up when you set it back down in there. And this one here's cracked, or there's something wrong inside here where the little ball bearings are or whatever, because it just isn't just ain't working right. There's another part of the pump. This is actually your main pump. You pull it up out of there, get your fingers underneath it so you don't lose all your little doohickeys down in there, just like I just did. And all of this I'm replacing, and I highly recommend that you do the same thing. These 2 parts and the pump assembly, I'm going to replace it all as one complete unit. And the reason why is because on the back side of these, even though these are steel and that's aluminum, these are going to wear little grooves around the outside edges, and sometimes in between here, and when you put these up against a new pump like the one I'm going to be replacing here, it's just going to eat it up, and you're going to have metal instantly inside the transmission, and that's one thing that you don't want to have. So these are very expensive. This thing here is probably about $200, and then an additional $100 for those two parts there. You're talking about $300 to replace the whole transmission, or to fix it. That's what I highly recommend, though. Okay. Down in here, you have a spring, a little washer, and then you have this little cradle assembly that has a couple of bearings in it, or it's got one bearing in it. There's a race inside here that'll come out, and then this race here. I'm showing you all of that because you want to clean all this up. You want it to be spotless when you put it back together. I mean, like I said, you're spending $300 for new parts. The last thing you want is a bunch of metal running through and wrecking it right off of the bat. On the back side over here is another bearing. You got a race, and then notice that this one is really, really thick. Then the direction, you want to notice the direction of which side of that bearing is touching it compared to this side, and then you got a thin bearing on that side. I mean, take notes of all these little details of inside of it. Like I said, there's not much, but it's enough to really screw things up if you go to put this back together and you put it together wrong. I'm going to go ahead and at this point get everything cleaned up, and then put it back together again. There's going to clean the gasket surfaces, clean the inside of it, buy you about maybe 2 or 3 cans of engine degreaser cleaner, brake clean, and spray the heck out of the inside of it, and or whatever means you have to clean it, but make sure you clean it, get all those little metal flakes of aluminum out of it, and then we're going to put this thing back together. Took me a while to do it, but everything's clean. I used brake cleaner, and then I came behind it and washed everything with some Dawn soap and water, and then blow dried everything off. These are the parts of the brand new pump, and if you notice, this is like a perfectly flat surface, nice and shiny, both of them. Where's the other one at? There we go. And this is aluminum, and this is steel, and that's one of the reasons why it's so crucial just to get the new parts, because if there's any grooves in the old ones, they're going to instantly cut into this aluminum. Then you're going to take a chance on running it, get metal shavings inside of your case, and just trashing everything that you worked so hard to fix. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together. First thing I'm going to do is We'll put a little bit of oil down inside of it here. And I'm using 2050 motor oil. Riley's paid me a lot of money to show you that. Right down in here, you got a little square block with a hole in the middle of it. That goes on your controller in the front, so I'm going to put that right there. And then next is your cradle assembly. And the little square block is going to slide right up through this. Lay that down in there. And next up is the bearing. You want the skinny one to go in first. Then your bearing this side up, and then the other half of the bearing down inside of it. Got a washer, then a spring, and then we're ready for the new pump assembly. I'm just going to grease this part of it up a little bit, oil it up, and then hold your fingers over top of these because they're going to want to fall out of there. Okay, we got that in there. And we'll take some oil and fill them things up. When you push your assembly down on it, it's going to push that oil up out of there, you can see. Okay, the next thing we're going to put in is our pump assembly. We got the two little guides. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in here because these are a really tight fit. And then now they're not a tight fit, so I'm going to go ahead and set them down in here. It's going to go this way, so I'm going to oil this up real good. Down here, you've got this shaft coming up that goes to your neutral, and that's where I'm having a little bit of trouble feeding it in there, but okay, we've got it all lined up. And we're going to take our new bolts and we're going to tighten this thing down. Running these down finger tight for right now. we want this thing to go straight down, so I'm putting pressure on it. And I don't know what the specs are on them, but I'm guessing they're about 60 foot-pounds is what you want to tighten them. And then now, this is the tricky part. We're going to put our bearings in first. We got the thin one. Then you got your bearing. This part towards the thicker one that's going to go on next. And then our little clippy thing. The round part is going to go up. Then underneath where your lever is, you want to turn it to where it's in at its furthest point. So it's going to be right there. Okay, I got this plastic rod. I'm gonna stick it right here just for right now. We're going to need that in a minute. And then I got these little plastic, guess they were feeler gauges. I want to set these right down in here because this still sticks out. When we push this down in there, we need it to clear over top of that without hitting anything in between there. Set that up here for right now. Now, a lot of your transmissions are just like this one with the two pumps on either end, and they're all basically the same, and there's always one of them that's a little harder to put in than the other. This battle here went on for about 4 or 5 minutes. Sometimes they go in easier, sometimes they're pretty difficult. But the most important thing that you got to remember when you're doing this is to keep those two surfaces from scratching each other when you're pushing that piston down in there. I probably could have found something a little better than what I was using to do it with, but I'm sure there are better things to use than what I had. It was just laying around and I grabbed it. It's a son of a bitch, but it can be done. Okay. Okay, this slides right up through here. There we go, just a little bit of a jiggle there. And the worm gear, part of the worm gear. Then we got the shaft. This gear goes over top of it. Fits on it just like this. So If you want to run this one up here first. And then be careful when you push, if you don't replace this seal over here, when you're pushing this thing back through, you don't want to tear that seal up. There it went. And you got a bearing. Next is the clip. Then you got your new seal. Then your clip. This thing just pushes on there. This is your little emergency brake gear. It sticks out a little bit on this side. This side's flat. You want the flat side out. Like that. And then your little clip over top. Put your filter in it, right here, just pushes on there. Make sure you get it flat. And then we're ready to put our pans on it. The stuff I'm using is called the right stuff. Any RTV silicone will work. This stuff is pretty instant. Once you put your pan on, you don't even really have to wait. You can go ahead and fill it with oil. But most of your other ones, you have to let them sit for a night, overnight, or a couple of hours. So if you've got the time, either way, it really doesn't matter.